What is it?
The main thing I got from it was like this sense of feeling seen and validated.
Well, why does it have to be this way?
This book was placed in my hand for this moment.
Insightful, learned a lot, wrote some quotes that I'm ready to like paint on my wall.
I love this book!
That we just kind of pull out some of the big themes that we see and talk about a few different ones.
I apologize if most of my contribution has K-pop references.
Alternative book title, The Feminine Mystique Part 2. You were really just gay all along. Welcome to Book Club.
With Julia.
And Victoria.
Two former quiet independent kids who used books to deal with their feelings.
I don't know what part of that is former, except for the kids part. I'm not a child, but everything else is true.
And we would love to be your book friends.
This is a podcast for the books we just can't shut up about.
And this week we're reading How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, a speculative fiction novel set in the near future about a global pandemic where each chapter has a new narrator and covers a different time, place, and sort of field or social sphere impacted by the plague. So, you know, familiar territory, I guess.
This episode will have mega spoilers. We'll be talking about all the aspects of the book, but whether or not you've read it, you're welcome here. Just know what we're getting into. Also, content warning on top, there's a lot of descriptions of death and grief, especially around plagues and pandemics, so if that's not something you're interested in listening to today, skip along to the next episode.
If you would like to support the show, you can follow us and comment and rate our show on whichever podcast platform you prefer. If you go down to the book links in our show notes, that will take you to bookshop.org, where you can buy from local bookstores, and we get a very small kickback. And then if you want to join the club, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/bookclubwithjv, where you get our archived episodes, our film club series, and a bunch of personal stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so How High We Go in the Dark. This was one that I read and was like, Juliet, it's time for a podcast.
Yeah.
So I had seen the cover of How High We Go in the Dark at like every bookstore everywhere, and I actually had no idea what it was about. And honestly, the title is one of those like long titles with short words that you just kind of forget. Yeah. And every time you say it, you have to like try to remember which order the words go in.
In my memory, the title is da 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 da.
Exactly.
The exact words that fill in are hit or miss in my brain.
But I was officially pushed to go read the book after I saw the author Sequoia Nagamatsu speak at a conference, and he was talking on a panel all about writing near future speculative fiction. And I was just super fascinated. Like, he was saying how he wrote most of this book before COVID, and he was actually doing a lot of the late stage revisions in fall 2020.
Wow.
And so, yeah, hearing him talk about his experience of having to like modify and edit and also try to sell and promote his pandemic book that he started years before COVID was even a twinkle in anyone's eye was interesting. And how, you know, he knew that his book was going to like enter conversations with readers. It's about a lot of big universal themes, but maybe hit a little closer to home than he initially realized when he first was setting out to tell the stories in this book. I was really like captured and captivated by the book. I gave it 5 stars, which I'm not quick to give out 5 stars on Storygraph. 5 stars for me is a book that I immediately want to reread and tell people about, which was true. I think this book has a really strong rereadability because you get some reveals at the end that you're like, wait, what? So you want to go back and read all the threads. This is actually something I saw in a lot of like Storygraph reviews, was just people saying like, I immediately want to read this, or I really enjoyed it. I didn't get all of it. I'd go back and reread. But some reviews are mixed. Some people didn't like the multiple character points of view, or I can't read about pandemics, I did not finish. It's understandable. I don't often write out full reviews on Storygraph, so I was curious to remember today that I wrote something. I said, Nagamatsu skillfully creates a deep and complex near-world future with a virus leaking from an ancient burial beneath the melting Siberian ice. Each chapter brings you so close to the grief and hope of characters dealing with the pandemic in the immediate aftermath and decades and generations after. A truly epic spec-fic novel that points to the cosmos just as much to the human heart. Like, what was this girl on? I was just like writing shit on the internet. Go follow me, Victoria from Book Club on Storygraph.
Past Victoria was like, this is gonna be a blurb that's gonna go in the reprinting. Like, you're
the 20th anniversary one is like Victoria from book club at Storygraph.
You're like channeling your inner blurb writer. Like that's 100% what that tone was. I love it. Something was in ya that day. You were like, the people need to know.
The people do need to know. But it sounds like, from what you've shared off mic, you haven't had quite the same experience.
Oh.
I'm curious, what was your experience reading?
Yeah, I read most of this over a few days, like I read most books, because I either am reading all of it or none at all. And I didn't really give myself time to process. I knew it was a pandemic book, and I didn't think, Julie, this might be a little triggering. Maybe you should give yourself some time. No. So I didn't really, I finished it and then immediately went to bed. And then the next morning, Victoria and I sat down to plan the episode. And so talking about it with you was when it kind of hit me, all the big feelings I had about it. And I didn't know how to articulate them. And the grief of this book just seeps into every single story and every single sentence. It's moving, but it's a lot. As I've been kind of processing it, I could sort of feel like there were kind of two Julias reading this book. One of them is this hypothetical Julia who was in college. She got assigned this book. A pandemic has not yet occurred. I could feel that hypothetical Julia, loving this book, how it's sort of very carefully detailed and crafted together and interwoven. I mean, we've both talked about how much we love those sort of cast of character books that are where all their lives sort of interweave. I love that shit. And it's sort of a fun combination of very, very real and very, not. I feel like I would have eaten it up. And that Julia was there while I was reading it, but there was also the Julia who has been through a pandemic and is in this particular time and place and was not ready. Needed to have a good cry about all of these people who it felt like were kind of, I don't know, it kind of felt like everyone was giving up, or there's this feeling of it is what it is kind of thing throughout the book that I was not ready for. I was not ready to feel it in myself. I was not ready to be told to feel that. There was a lot of resistance happening because I was just feelings. And we're going to talk about that in therapy tomorrow. And so what I really wanted to talk about today is that first Julia who was reading the book and really obsessed with it. And that is, I think, who he was writing to initially. You know what I mean? And it just makes me think about, yes, he did get to do a round of edits post-pandemic so that, he could make sure that it wasn't exactly what was happening in our lives. But yeah, I just think about how impacted this story was by reality. You can't change the fact that this book was published in a particular time and place, that we are approaching it with particular experiences. You can't undo that now. Yeah, so I'm curious to see what we uncover today.
This will be a pre-therapy session, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll back up a little bit and we'll talk about our author. Sequoia Nagamatsu is originally from Oahu, Hawaii, and also spent a lot of time growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, Northern California. And he went to Grinnell College, which I remember learning is in Iowa, I think. He did study anthropology, though.
Woo woo!
And after Nagamatsu's grandfather passed away in 2007, Nagamatsu flew to Japan to, as he described it, grieve and explore his Japanese heritage. And it was there that he started writing the collection of individual stories that all tie together into How High We Go in the Dark. So some of the earliest stories he's writing in 2007, 2008, 2009.
Wow.
He ended up spending a couple years in Japan teaching English. And that also kind of pushed him to just pursue creative writing. So he came back to the States and went to Southern Illinois University, Carbondale to get an MFA in writing. And today he teaches creative writing at St. Olaf College up in the Twin Cities area. And he does the Rainier Writing Workshop Low Residency MFA program. He also was the managing editor of Psychopomp magazine for about 10 years with his wife, also a writer. Together they live with their cat, Kalahira, their real dog, Fenris, and a Sony Ayoba robot dog named Calvino.
Oh, wow.
I love so much that he has his own robot dog, considering there's a whole story dedicated to robot dogs.
That makes a lot of sense. He seemed to know a lot.
It's like, you've done a lot of deep research for this one.
What does the real dog think of the robot dog?
I don't know. I do know that if you Google Sequoia, you get a picture of him with the robot dog.
Oh, wow.
Like cuddling. It's kind of cute, but also it's a robot. So How High We Go in the Dark was published in 2022, and it got, a lot of critical acclaim. It was a bestseller in the US and shortlisted for a bunch of awards. This is actually Nagamatsu's first novel that he published. He previously published a short story collection back in 2016 called Where We Go When All We Were Is Gone. He has a way of writing titles, I will say.
It's a different rhythm, but it's very similar.
And that short story collection contains about a dozen stories that were inspired by Japanese folklore and pop culture, again, drawing on his experience living in Japan and a bit of his Japanese American heritage. Speaking of his own heritage and how it's expressed in How High We Go in the Dark, he said he was curious about exploring his own heritage and hadn't really had an opportunity to do that. So when he went to Japan, that was kind of like a big moment for him. Being third generation Japanese American, he continues, I was disconnected from that past. I also wanted to use that time abroad as a kind of reset button to reflect about next steps and to grieve for my deceased grandfather and think about ways I could honor him. So that kind of comes through in his writing. And we also see it's a notable but small component of the book that basically everyone is Asian American. There are some Japanese characters as well. And he writes that he wanted to give voice to people who are third and fourth generation Asian American, where maybe small aspects of life are different because of family heritage, but by and large are disconnected from the realities of grandparents or great-grandparents. My great-grandmother came to America in the early part of the 20th century. My grandfather was in a Japanese internment camp in World War II. But those were their stories. I wanted to write the story of the kind of life I've lived. So yeah, those are just some threads that I found in a couple interviews that connect his personal life and his experiences kind of into this novel that we have is set futuristically and kind of looks towards the future, but is definitely drawing from his background and especially a lot from his grief of his grandfather passing.
I wonder if there's an element too of a grief of heritage. It seems like those two things were really intertwined. I feel like there is a sense of a desire for community, a desire for context, a desire for history, kind of running underneath all these stories. It's just a kernel of a thought, but I feel like I could see that in a lot of these. So, since this novel started off as a book of short stories and, has then become a novel with an overarching narrative and stuff, structurally it's very much a collection of individual stories, individual narrators. They exist in the same time and are sort of responding to the same circumstances from different perspectives. But really the story that kind of sets the narrative arc of the novel and the planet and has impacts on every story within it is the alien goddess woman, I don't know what to call her, mother, perhaps, who sort of birthed the planet in this universe and accidentally created the virus and is directly related to some of the characters, and she appears multiple times, and et cetera, et cetera.
Quelly, I think was her name in The Scope of Possibility.
Quelly?
Yeah, Qweli.
Okay.
I didn't remember that was her name. I just looked it up on this really cool character map I found online. We'll put it in the show notes, but it connects all the individual people of each story and which ones overlap.
Well, because I remember there was a part where it was in my native language, it would have sounded, my name sounds like Quelly. And so I didn't really internalize that because I was like, well, that's not her name. But thank you for finding that. So I'm just going to tell her story and then other characters will come up as we talk about different themes. Technically, very first story, we first meet Quelly as Clara, a climate scientist who has died excavating this cave system where the body of a girl is discovered surrounded by strange markings, and the girl is studied in the Siberian lab that Clara was working from and is discovered to have this unknown virus, which is kept secret for a while, but is what ends up devastating the planet by infecting organisms. Most of the time, that's how it travels. It infects organisms that travel and then infects people, because it's not airborne, which seems like a very deliberate choice to not be COVID. But we learn later that the girl was actually Clara/Quelly. It was her first sort of Earth child. And she didn't quite get her transformation right into her body. And so essentially the virus is bits of her alien DNA that the way the book describes it is that the aliens their DNA is like pure possibility. And so they're sort of glowing and constantly changing is the impression I get, right? And so what that DNA does to a human body is it teaches organs to be different organs and to mutate or to glow.
Yeah, so like your lungs stop producing more lung cells, they become heart cells.
Yeah.
And so now you don't have lungs, but you have two hearts, but your heart is becoming a brain,
right.
And your liver is becoming an intestine, and it's just, like, terrifying.
Right.
And
so you just, like, slowly die of organ failure as you're, like, lighting up, which is terrifying. So then we watch several people deal with the next few years as, like, the global economy fundamentally shifts into, like, a death industry, where funerary services control the banks, and you pay in funeral credits. Everything's about death. And in the midst of that, after Quelly has died as Clara, she comes back as Teresa, a physicist who helps this guy Brian build a black hole, which ends up in his brain. But they want to make a spaceship with enough power so that people can go exploring and find a second Earth. The fundamental issue of space travel is you can't store enough fuel on the ship to be able to make it far enough. So you put a black hole in the ship and that powers it, I guess. And they want to start a human colony. She also, as this person, we understand, she drops off a bit of her DNA anonymously to the vaccine researchers, which allows them to develop a cure. But she decides to stay behind and not go on the spaceship to wait for her daughter, because she had to leave her home planet to build Earth while her daughter was still only like 700 years old, which I guess is young for them. But her daughter, if you go back and read carefully again, you realize her daughter is running a VR cafe in Japan. So her daughter is on Earth. They just gotta find each other. So towards the end of the book, we sort of watch post-cure. We watch the rest of the planet learning to cope with their experiences and try to heal and how things shift. And then the colonists manage to find a new home 6,000 years later on a new planet. That's the overarching narrative. Obviously, there's tons of individual people in there. We don't need to get into all that. That would be an audiobook.
At that point, we just read you the entire book.
Yeah, but I thought that would be the most helpful part in case someone read it and didn't actually pick up on all the little nods to our girl Quelly, because it's just little tiny details thrown in there that you might not see the first time.
Now that you say this, I was rereading the section where Teresa mentions to Brian, oh, did you hear?
Mm-hmm.
There's this potential for a vaccine. Researchers got a hold of something.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think it definitely was her that sent it? Or do we think it could be her daughter?
Well, because her daughter lands during the forensic lady. What's her name?
Aubrey?
Yes. So when Aubrey's hanging out with Laird, the TV's on, and this capsule lands in the ocean, people are freaking out, but they dismiss it as, like, conspiracy theories or whatever. Which, in a weird way, this book is kind of pro-conspiracy theory. I just wanted to point that out. But, yeah, so her daughter lands, several years in. So I don't know if she would understand what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'd make more sense if it was Quelly that was like, you know what, this might help.
Because she knows, when we read her story, she knows she can see her DNA in everyone's bodies. So she knows that's what's infecting them. So it would make sense that she would understand that her DNA would help. I don't know how the daughter would figure that out, but it may be.
My only thought is because we don't really get to delve into this, and this was actually something that didn't really phase for me until you pointed it out. Like, why didn't Teresa do this sooner?
Yeah.
If it was her. Because she was Clara, who dies in the cave looking at her daughter. And then she comes back. We don't know what gap in time. Is it like her timeline is so infinite that when she comes back 10 years later, it's like, oh shit, I missed 10 years, I didn't realize what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Or did she come back immediately in another body and be like, the humans have to figure this out, I'm not supposed to intervene this much, even though she's the one that caused the problem? Or was she just like racked with guilt? And then my thought is like, daughter flies in from another planet, is not aware what's going on, and is like, y'all are dying. This is weird.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know. I have a special alien DNA. I'm gonna just send it in to a researcher, see if they can figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
That part,
that's a good point.
It is poking holes in my 5 stars, because I'm like, oh, I don't know how much I like that.
Yeah.
Of like, not getting to sit with, even if it was supposed to be like, Quelly, Clara, Teresa, alien goddess lady, you know, debating how much she should intervene to correct something that she accidentally let happen. We don't actually ever have that as a reader. We don't, like,
right,
get her debating. We just get little slivers that we're like, oh, it sounds like a vaccine was finally found, but it's like, only on reflection, and you're like, wait, but like, went on for a really long time.
Yeah, that's one of the last things you get, right? Aside from the message from the colonists 6,000 years later, that's the very, very last thing you read. The last thing you read is Quelly's story, and, you know, so then she never really explains that gap in time. She never explains how long it takes to come back as a new person. She makes it seem like it's kind of different every time, and she has to do a little subterfuge to, like, make sure that they don't pick up on that she's not really dead, or that she's a new person or something. I don't know. It's very hand-wavy.
You know what? I wonder, because they were studying Clara's body, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if she couldn't, like, metamorphose into a new being until, like, they laid the body to rest, or, like...
They cremated her, because remember her mother gets her ashes, and she scatters them in space.
Okay, so maybe it was however long it was between when she died and they cremated. But now I have to go back and look. Did they cremate her before her dad even got there? Because I don't think he gets to see the body.
It feels messy. Like, the first time you read through, right, you're picking up these little details. You're like, this smells like aliens. And it's too pointed to not be a thing, right? And so you're sort of picking up on these clues, and then you get to the end, you're like, oh my god, I was right! It was aliens! But then I felt really unsatisfied with her relationship to the pandemic specifically. The focus of her story was on her daughter, her relationship with her daughter, right? That's the main point of her story. And she gets really tied to Earth, and then everything goes wrong, and so then she pulls back. And then she gets really tied to Earth, and everything goes wrong, and so she pulls back. And she's kind of in this back and forth relationship with Earth. But it just left a really bad taste in my mouth that when she came back, the thing that she prioritized and the thing that she talked about the most was space travel, and not a goddamn cure when she knows exactly what's wrong. I'm like, how many millions of people died in between when you found out your biggest regret and when you gave them your DNA? Like, that's a long time. That left a really bad taste in my mouth. And space travel doesn't feel hopeful to me. Even, like, watching, like, Star Trek or something. Like, I don't feel any sense of a new beginning. It makes me very sad. It feels like giving up, just kind of that you don't care enough for it. I don't know. Like, it comes off as a bit callous to me. And that, you know, probably has something to do with who's been in charge of the space travel in the last couple years. You know, the big dicks shooting into the sky for the billionaires. But then to have this sort of mother figure who's the secret overarching narrative of the story, to have her focus when she comes back be on space travel and not the cure, felt really like, girl, what? It's like, what? Why is a black hole what you're worried about right now? I don't know. It left a weird taste in my mouth. And then that was the end of the book. And I was like,
It's interesting because I feel like the more we get into the nuance of the space travel and the science and the vaccine, I literally was not thinking about any of this. That's like not at all what stuck with me when I read this book. Like, the space travel I found interesting. I found it a little sad. I found it like when they left Earth, there was no cure yet.
Yeah.
And it was like one of these, the science finally caught up, and there's this feeling of desperation, and we watch these characters make difficult decisions. Mm-hmm. You know, we have Clara's mother, Miki, and her granddaughter. They get on the spaceship, And it's kind of like a bit in Clara's memory of like trying to envision a new future, but it is like this unknown, you know, they're cutting off the rest of their lives. They get a message from Earth and it's like 60 years have passed on Earth, and they get the update like, hey, we found a cure. Like, here's how things are going. And it actually is going pretty well. Like, things are actually going well back on Earth. And so it's like a bit of that, like, they were this, not the last ditch, but like one of many efforts for a hopeful future. I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't as interested in that storyline.
Yeah.
What I more cared about were these like the humanizing themes. You know, like even though we're like looking to aliens and the stars and there's spaceships and there's like a sentient pig, like what really caught me is the different ways that we deal with grief. And what we consider hopeful. Because I found a lot of hope in this. Because what I found in all of these stories is, to better or worse abilities, people are connecting with each other. And they're learning about themselves. And a lot of people have messed up. They're grieving they lost opportunities. So for example, we mentioned the sentient pig. We will bring up the sentient pig at this point now.
We will address Snortorious PIG.
Snortorious PIG had me crying. I've never cried over a pig. I will never forget that story.
Good God.
But we have a researcher. His son has the Arctic plague and treatments were not working. And David is a medical researcher who, this is like his expertise, is studying viruses and pandemics, and he's so committed to trying to find a cure. It breaks up him and his wife. His wife takes the son away to try different programs. Eventually, his son dies, and he's not even there for it. But he's still so committed to this life of like trying to figure out a cure. But because they need more and more organ transplants, they're working on growing pigs that will have human organs that they can then transplant into the children. And so one of the pigs he's working with, basically, it's like, it's sci-fi, it's also magic.
Yeah.
Basically gets enough human DNA into him that the pig becomes like sentient in a way where he's like telepathically communicating with the doctor and the research assistants.
He develops like a human brain.
Yeah. So he's not like speaking with his snout. It's like you can hear the pig talking telepathically. The main arc of the story though is David being a father.
Yeah.
And like getting to have almost a moment of redemption, but then also getting to see the pig kind of step up in a moral way. You know, David and the research assistants are trying to protect Snortorious because, you know, researchers from the university want to come in. The government is trying to be like, this is our pig, we're going to dissect it and we learn things. And Snortorious, because he's telepathic and can kind of like read what's going on, basically learns like, I'm here for the kids. So, like, please just let me be what I'm supposed to be. Like, if you don't want them to take me away, I don't want to be taken away. I'm scared. Let's just go. So he, like, gives his life to science in the most heart-wrenching way. And so those are the stories that stay with me. It's David mourning his son and grieving, like, the type of father he wasn't able to be, getting a moment of redemption and this hope, and also getting to have this, like, bond with Snortorious. It's just like, oh, I'll keep thinking about that forever. We also get different kinds of grief. We get, you know, the grief of so many people dying, but also of, like, missed opportunity when your life is split in two ways. I think of one of the later stories is actually following a family generations after the worst of the Arctic plague. The story is called Grave Friends. And like Julia mentioned in the summary, there was so many people dying. The funerary industry becomes like this huge thing. It's expensive to be buried. And there's a community in Japan where the people have come together and basically are like, we'll share funeral spaces. So when you go visit at the temple, the altar, it's just one urn and it's got everyone in it. So they're grave friends, that's what it's called. But we have basically third generation after the plague. This young woman comes back. She's from Chicago. She's coming back to Japan for the first time in years. She's pregnant. She has her whole life back in Chicago. She's kind of like torn because she has this tension with her family because her mom especially is upset that she left. But there's like, that kind of messy grief of, this used to be my life. And she's back in Japan and she has some regrets, but also she doesn't regret leaving, and she knows she's going to leave again because she's like built this other life elsewhere. And so those are the moments that really stuck with me, like every story is a different way to look at grief. It's like we have like a crystal of grief and we're just like changing the angle on it. Child and parent, parent and child, a lot of partnerships and relationships, people grieving their past lives, like who they could have been or what they could have done differently.
It's interesting though, like the pig son story. For me, the whole point of it felt like is that like you can't avoid death. You can't stop it. What David has to learn is to accept the fact that his son is dead rather than, you know, it, because he spent the remainder of his son's life like trying to fix it, trying to stop it, trying to whatever. And he's never really stopped to like process it until this pig came into his life. And now he has to like accept that his son is dead. At the very end, he gets to finish the end of the book that he never got to finish with his son Fitch, with the pig. And then the pig dies. He gets to give the end of life care to the pig that he never got to give to his son. Maybe that is redemption, but to me it felt like a kind of embracing or acceptance of reality. Like so many of these people live in very, very firm denial, or they're doing things that are trying to get them to escape from a family situation, you know, the world around them that is falling apart, etc. So many of the stories are like really brutal, brutal things are happening. And there's so much death around them and the dissolving of so many relationships. And it's about these people having to come to terms with the fact that it's happening and accept the fact that it's happening and this is my reality and not try to fight it. I think that, you know, it makes a lot of sense when the book is supposed to be this sort of using this hypothetical pandemic to sort of examine all the different facets of grief and all the different types of grief and all the different familial relationships and stuff, you know, as like this extended metaphor. Like, that's a really beautiful idea and it makes so much sense, right? When you're coming to it, having experienced the bigger thing, it's not a metaphor anymore. It's real. That it's a lot harder to accept that message, I think. I don't know why. There's something about like being asked to accept that the whole world is a certain way versus being asked to accept that you yourself are a certain way or that your personal relationships are a certain way. Those feel like two very different asks, you know? Like accept the nature of the world, don't try to change it, versus to accept yourself for who you are. Those feel like two very different things to me.
I agree that they feel like different things. I don't know if I read the book as it's asking us to accept existence as it is, because what we see are climate scientists who are like, we see Clara as almost like this heroic character and her father misunderstands her because she's so torn up about like the way that the planet is warming and how it's killing people and it's killing our environment. And she's like, I'm going to do something about it. And her dad's like, well, you need to be here with your child. And she's like, yes, but like this is bigger than that. This is for her. Like I do this every day for her so she can have a future. She can have a different life. So we have climate scientists who are like searching for something different. We've got researchers who are trying to like, if this planet doesn't work out, we need another option. Like we need the hope that our children can go somewhere else if this becomes like uninhabitable. And we've also got the researchers who are like, we don't follow them as closely, but we do get like David, for example. Like I don't think his ending is anywhere near, and now I will be done researching. But my work matters, and I need to accept that my son has died and I can't do anything about it. Because I don't, like you said, I don't think he accepted what happened to his son. He just like kept his head down and kept moving forward. I think my read is more like we need both. We need hope, we need community, but we need to accept what has happened. Because if we push it down or push it away or like pretend that it wasn't that big of a deal, don't talk about it, because if we talk about it, maybe it'll happen to us. Like that's where we like break down as a society. And I think I see a lot of this in the Melancholy Nights in a Tokyo Virtual Cafe.
Yeah.
That story really emphasizes the need to like be real with each other, because most of the connection is happening in a virtual environment, but our main character is really like craving this like personal connection. And like one of the characters describes the city of Tokyo and how it feels, saying people like to forget about the sadness of the city. They walk and walk, no one stops. It's like we're all still infected. We choose to be blind to each other's suffering. It might make things easier to bear, but our hearts are cold. And I think that idea of like suffering quietly or just trying to like get it through is, like, not healthy. Because we see time and again our characters, like, needing community or regretting that they didn't connect more. Yeah.
I guess that story as well also has these sort of nods in the background to the fact that there are, like, structural issues. Like, yes, there was a cure, but so many people have the equivalent of, like, long COVID for us, right? It's like a mass disabling event. Like, technically they're not sick anymore, but their organs, you can't undo the organ damage. And so this woman is left with a daughter who's constantly in pain and whose brain has been fundamentally changed and stuff. And so they can't really communicate anymore. And when they die, the newspaper runs a story about it on how, like, social services have failed. And I do think that's something that's mentioned throughout the book. Little nods to how, like, capitalism is just not the way to deal with death. It's so fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, it's really, really bad for everyone. And it's so exploitative and depersonalized and, like, leaves people with no good options. There are no solutions in the book, so again, it's depressing, but I do agree with all of those points that he's making. Yeah. I think something I really want, like, I want someone, a different part of the world to, like, or I'm sure it already exists. We just need to find it. I want to read some, like a pandemic book or a apocalypse novel from different cultures, and I want to compare them because I am so curious what other people would assume would happen in a plague situation. I mean, obviously, some things already did happen, right? So maybe not a plague situation. In an apocalyptic situation, what would other cultures, what would other people assume people would do? I don't have any, like, deeper thoughts on that, but I just wonder if it would be so exploitative and so depressing, right? If we assume that, like, the systems that we have now would only get worse. And, like, in America, that has been the case. You know, that proves true. But people are also really sick of them. I want to, like, unpack kind of assumptions about humanity in apocalypse novels. I think that's my new thesis idea. It's going to be my personal project.
Time for another degree.
Put me back in, coach. Because, you know, this book is very upfront about how it is about a specific kind of corner of the world and a specific network of people between Japan and the US. And he doesn't pretend to write about the entire planet, right? He's really just upfront about it's about these people and what they're doing. But it just makes me curious.
Your hypothesis is that others would be more optimistic?
Not necessarily optimistic, just different. Maybe more collectivist? Like, maybe things would still be terrible, but they would be a little more collaborative. I don't know.
Because I also think, okay, so speculative fiction and horror are, like, ways to look at ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. It's like a mirror we use to look at our current society. And I wonder, I'm even curious, like, because I don't know much about the plague genre beyond, like, a handful of American novels. Is it saying something so specific about, like, maybe our individualism that, you know, the biggest fear is something that comes indiscriminately for all of us? Does that say more about our, like, American drive for individualism? Because these books often point us to community. They're often telling us what we need is more connection. What we need is to not be alone. What we need is not to be afraid of other people. Like, there's got to be ways that we still find community. And maybe, again, this is my post-pandemic addled brain that's also like, that's what a plague taught me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd be curious to do more comparison between plague novels to see, like, is my hypothesis that it's American Plague novels point towards problems with individuality. Does that have any merit to it? Does your hypothesis that, probably something to dig into?
Yeah.
Usually in an episode we try to wrap up and have like a real like point we got to, and this one was like, we're gonna go read a lot more.
Yeah.
We're gonna go read a lot more. But with time, because Julia needs to pace herself on plague novels.
Yeah. Julia needs to intersperse them with other things. We need a little escape. We need a little reality. We need a little escape. We need a little reality. We can go back and forth. That is a good point, actually, about, like, why this book was written. I keep going back to why it was written versus where it emerged in time, right? I feel like those are two very different things, two very different places. And I think I would agree that it is arguing in favor of more connection and sort of pointing to, like, that's the problem, is that, we're all too isolated. And that he wasn't trying to say anything about the actual pandemic, right? That wasn't the point, right? He was I think my brain gets a little stuck on that, is that, like, by accident of when it was released, it is accidentally saying things about the pandemic when it wasn't intended to. And my brain is making those connections because I can't help it. Yeah, I mean, that very similar to so many conversations that we had being quarantined together, and the aftermath afterwards of trying to figure out our lives after. We were both like, let's all live in the same giant house and start a commune. Like, let's all, let's emphasize connection over whatever other goals that we have, or, you know what I mean? So it would also then be interesting to analyze, like, what other cultures feel that they need to learn. What faults are they pointing out in their own people?
And another thread, just leaving more speculation for our listeners to join us in, is this was like the third or fourth book I've read in the last year. The reveal is there was an alien among us all along.
Yes!
I'm like, what? Again? When we were recording the 8 Billion Genies episode, Julia hadn't read How High We Go in the Dark, and it didn't make it in the episode because she kept having to cut it out because I kept bringing up this book, and she's like, that's not what we're talking about. But in 8 Billion Genies, there's a genie among them, and in this one, there's an alien among us. And I think of, this is how you lose the Time War, where we have these really old characters that, exist through multiple lifetimes and pop in and out of human history. I'm really curious what that says about our culture. Am I drawing, a loose thread between a lot of books that have a similar trope? Yeah, books use tropes. But also, I don't know. I'm curious what it says about, American culture. Is it, a post-religious thing that we keep, bringing in some sort of, either immortal or incredibly long-living, somehow superpowered person or being that, can live a bunch of different lives and, connect the threads and, tell our other protagonists, a glimpse of, what a long life has taught them. Not really The Cellulose of Time War, but other novels with these really old dudes and gals.
I have two thoughts. One is the influence that more non-dual religions have had in North America the past couple decades. The idea that a person would be multiple things, or, that your energy can live for a really long time. It's I see a bit of that influence there. But the other thing, because it immediately makes me think of Doctor Who, right? The Doctor Who...
As soon as I stopped listing things, I was like, I forgot Doctor Who.
You forgot Doctor Who.
Doctor Who is, yes.
Immediately thought of the Doctor Who, specifically the history episodes, where we go to Queen Victoria, we go to Shakespeare, we go to Madame de Pompadour, we go to Pompeii, classic. We rewrite history saying that it was actually aliens, and the Doctor and his companion, or her companion, were essential characters in the story that got reinterpreted or written out or whatever. I mean, that started back in the late 90s when that was revived?
2005 is when the revival started.
2005? Okay. So what I always really enjoyed about those growing up, and what it feels tied to for me and my own personal experience, is the feeling of getting a sense of truth of what actually happened. You feel like something's being revealed to you about reality. That it encourages you to re-examine the past for the things that might be hidden, right? The things that you might have missed the first time. Don't look at the official story. Look at the real story. There's the official story that went in the history books, and then there's the one that actually happened. And it felt really satisfying to have a sense of like, oh, that sort of reimagining. And I feel like it goes with the theme of so much of unlearning that Americans kind of have to do with our own history, and that you see very prevalent, I think, with a lot of people our age, with the history that we've inherited. Going back and be like, okay, but what actually happened? Who was actually there? Who was actually influential? Who actually made this decision, right? It was actually a collective of people. It was actually like that idea that big guy had was actually stolen from the women in his family. You know what I mean? Like you're sort of, that's kind of what it feels like. So I don't know what to do with that in this book. But I think it could also be like a post-religion thing. I think you're onto something there as well. Those are my two theories.
Yeah. If anyone didn't study literature in college, this was a lot of what we did. Just posit theories. Oh, we should go do some more reading. This is a really great use of an hour. I got so much out of this. People being like, wait, what? There are no answers. We just get to discuss.
You come to your class discussion with a half-baked theory. You have just enough evidence for it to be plausible, and then your professor says, okay, go read more about that, and then write a whole paper.
Come back when you've read more.
Yeah.
So, wrapping up, I kind of wanted to touch on a story we didn't talk about at all, but it's the titular's chapter, How High We Go in the Dark. And it's a really odd story because it's not grounded in our reality. It's actually grounded in the just mental space of all these comatose patients who are, they're in a coma because of the Arctic plague, and they have a moment of shared consciousness. So it's described as basically people stumbling in the dark. They can't see anything, but they're running into each other and they're talking, and people are panicking and they're freaked out, and they don't know why they're there. Then people start kind of having these memory bubbles. I don't know. In my mind, they were bubbles. And they would walk through these bubbles and they would experience someone else's memory, someone else's history. And so it's also kind of fun in this collection because we get little snippets where someone is described and you're like, oh, that's so-and-so from this other story. Mm-hmm. And they bumped into each other in the dark. But the characters start kind of exploring the space. And they realize that if they go up higher, there's kind of this reverse gravity effect. They kind of feel like they're being pulled up. And then there's a baby crying. And at this point, we've only encountered adults and some children. But there's like a baby crying. Our cast of characters find the baby and decide, we want to give this baby a chance. And so then the greatest of largest human pyramids ever to been created, it was created in the dark. And no one can see anything, and they're stepping on each other, and people are, like, telling their life stories to the people huddled with them, and it's really hard to picture, but just, like, hundreds of people piled on top of each other. Uh-huh. And the guy climbs all the way up, and he has the baby, and he lifts the baby up, he throws the baby, and the baby is light enough, and the reverse gravity that high up is strong enough, the baby gets flown away. And you described this as a trope of the entire collection called Throw the Baby.
Yeah.
Which literally happens once in this story. But I liked this analogy a lot. Like, how do we see this idea of throw the baby kind of like in the whole collection?
It made a lot of sense after I'd finished it when you explained that this was partly about the grief of losing his grandfather, and there's this strong sense of like familial relationships, like parent-child, grandparent-grandchild, like that was a big theme throughout the whole book. But particularly you see this theme of parents or adults in general trying to give their children a chance, right? Of trying to make, like, the world sucks right now, but I want to make it slightly better for my kids, or like the most extreme example, and the one where I literally wrote in the book, throw the baby, in the margins, was Clara's mother. She and her granddaughter Yumi get on this spaceship, right? And the whole story is about searching for a new planet to colonize. The very, very end of her story is this letter to Yumi, who's about to be woken up after 6,000 years of sleep to populate and sort of make use of this new home. And so what she says to Yumi is, we helped each other get here, but now is your time. It's time to lead me into the red grass and tell me the story of how we get to be. It's time to wake up. And so I wrote in the margin, throw the baby, because it felt like the whole point of this story, this particular one, and kind of the through line even that we see of Clara being Yumi's mother, who's also Quelly, and Clara was so focused on like trying to make the planet more habitable for her child and everyone's children. And like Miki is sailing in a spaceship for thousands of years to try and find a new home for Yumi, where, you know, now it's Yumi's time. We as a collective, but I myself as well, have done all I can in order to set up a new situation for you, but I can't do anything else. And so now I just have to throw you and hope that it was the right decision. And you know what I mean? Like metaphorically throw you into this new space and hope that you know what to do with it and that you'll be okay. And like, it's really heartbreaking at the end of, you know, the human pyramid where they literally throw the baby, because the kid who throws the baby immediately regrets it and starts crying, and the baby's crying and like disappears into the ether, and we have no idea what they just did. We're like, we have no idea where we are. That could have been the craziest decision ever. This baby could be floating in space indefinitely forever. You know what I mean? Like, what a crazy decision. And then we find out towards the end of the book that that baby woke up, right? Because they sort of sent her out of a coma and lived a full life and stuff. We learn later what it meant. At the time, we have no idea, right? They just have to hope that this is the best opportunity for this baby. And I felt like a lot of the stories were about that. Even this sort of overarching theme of Quelly trying to do the right thing in order to make a place for her daughter so that she and her daughter can be together. And she kind of has to throw her daughter into a world too soon. She feels like she's leaving her daughter too soon, and she just has to hope, like, I hope you've got this. I have to trust you. Here's a pendant. Come find me. And I thought that was... I saw that sort of underlying theme in little hints throughout every single story. This feeling of like, you know, you can't control what the next generation does. You can't control your kids. You just have to hope that you did enough for them to know what to do. And for them to make it. The throwing of the baby felt like a very strong sort of metaphor that you could latch onto, but...
It's gonna be my new phrase.
Yeah.
Anytime we're like, I don't know, Julia, I've debated back and forth, here's all the things. I just gotta throw the baby.
Just gotta throw the baby.
Just gotta throw the baby, see what happens. Hope for the best.
Yeah.
So now as we come to the end, I don't believe I have, but did I convince you this is a 5-star read? Don't think that was my goal.
No. I don't think that was your goal.
I set out and was immediately, I might backtrack my 5 stars. No, I still stand by. I stand by.
Yeah, no, stand your ground. I don't know if you've convinced me that it's a 5-star book, but I think you have convinced me that, like, it is more hopeful than I experienced it. I just was particularly sensitive to certain ideas that were in it.
Totally, yeah.
And was not really ready. I feel like there's things I missed. And I think if I read it again in a different time and place, I would have a different experience. So, but I in no way have a negative opinion of this book. I want to make that clear at the end. This is a very good book. I'm just sad.
That's Julia's blurb. Quote, this is a very good book, dash, I'm just sad.
Oh my god.
So, for those who are looking for something else to read after How High We Go in the Dark, what do you recommend they check out next?
Okay, well, we mentioned This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Mokhtar and Max Gladstone. Definitely check that out. And then, if you want a pandemic novel actually set in the actual pandemic in the United States, Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout is very good. Devastating. In like a very, very quiet way. There are just certain ways that she describes the quarantine feeling in particular. Like, it's really a quarantine novel that were just so right on the money that I would knock me on my ass sometimes. It was like, wow. So yeah, what about you?
For a, like, historical fiction, not fantasy, not sci-fi, about the AIDS epidemic, specifically in Chicago, The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai is a really incredible read. It is also incredibly sad. So yeah, big trigger warnings on that one. A lot of death. And I was trying to think of other kind of interconnected short story collections, novels we've read. I mean, Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi is one I always think of if you like a chapter where it's encapsulated all in its own story, and then the next chapter has just a little touch of either a character or a theme or a location. In this case, it's all characters that connect into the next chapter. Homegoing is a great one. Interpretive Maladies by Jhumpa Lahiri is truly a short story collection, not a novel, but also incredible and has that kind of interconnectedness as well. Yeah, and then Julie and I will report as we read more plague novels from around the world, and send us your recs.
Send us plague novels from wherever you're from, or if you've read one from elsewhere. Send them. You can comment, at least if you're on Spotify, there's a little thing where you can send us book recs, and we'll see it.
And lastly, what are you currently obsessed with? What is bringing you joy?
So last night I watched the movie Quiz Lady on Hulu with Awkwafina and Sandra Oh playing sisters.
That one looks so good.
On like a Jeopardy-like show. So funny. And sisterhood movies are always great, and their comedic chemistry is so funny. It's a great time. It's kind of like a rom-com. It's like a sister rom-com, is what it feels like. Just classic. Really good. And then also, now that the strike is over, congrats to all strikers involved, specifically the SAG-AFTRA strike. We can finally get the actors from Our Flag Means Death posting their behind-the-scenes content, and it has been so fun. I cannot even begin to describe how much joy I've experienced in the last 5 days. We have gotten so many dances. Leslie Jones has a whole compilation of every single cast member dancing in a very silly way. It's so delightful, and they love each other so much. I want to give them the world. What about you?
I recently read The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff, and it's a fun, also super dark, fun and dark novel set in India where a woman whose husband has left kind of gets a rep for helping people get rid of husbands they don't want.
Cool.
And yeah, so the character is really inspired by a real person who was nicknamed the Bandit Queen. And I wasn't sure what to think going into the novel. Storygraph recommended it to me based on my reading preferences. So I was like, okay, we'll see. And I got into it, and it was a delight. Also, like I said, very dark. Like, huge content warning on, like, domestic abuse and sexual abuse and all that stuff. But I thought it was a delight through and through to read. I also started watching Make Some Noise, a game show. My friend set it on. It's like improv comedy kind of panel show, but it's by Americans, so it's not as good as the British ones, but it is pretty good. We had that on in the background all weekend. I was hanging out with some friends. I did attend my first ever murder mystery party this weekend. It was so much fun.
She got to run the mailroom. Her lifelong dream.
I was the mailroom operator. I was a suspect. I did not do it. But I did get at least one person to, like, come and formally accuse me, and I was pretty proud of that. Because my character was the least sus of all the characters.
But she had all the intel.
I had all the intel.
Mm-hmm.
It was really fun. It was 70s themed, so we all had, like, fun costumes.
Oh, so cute.
Yeah.
Always find the gossip lady. She knows everything.
That's right.
All right. Well,
I need some water. And to our listeners, happy reading.
bye!
Thank you for listening to Book Club with Julia and Victoria. We would love to hear your thoughts on this book or the topic we discussed, so you can share your review and recommendations with us on Instagram at BookClubWithJB, on our website, bookclubwithjb.com, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also visit our website for show notes with links to all of the recommendations and the things bringing us joy. If you don't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever podcast platform you are listening on so that you can be notified when our next episode is released. This episode was co-hosted and produced by myself, Victoria Bruick, along with Julia Clausen. Rebecca Gasme provides us with project management support. Our music is composed by Greg Bruick, and our logo was designed by Gabby Fabland. Until next time, happy reading.